Morning.
Morning.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. I was listening to some of those videos in the, you know, outline or whatever it's called, instructions.
Yeah, I always forget about the videos. So I
Well, it's
have,
not that I was having trouble staying awake. It's familiar territory, but it's not so good.
oh no. Yeah, I have to go back. 'Cause, yeah, I usually skip the videos and then I always say, oh, I got to go back and watch them. So I'll probably go back at some point to see what's what on them.
Yeah, I have trouble removing the ad blocker. I evidently I have one. I have no get rid of it though.
Mhm.
Hi, Diane.
Good morning or afternoon.
Oh, after, uh-oh, I'm gonna start that one. Yes. I'm still trying to get used to saying good afternoon.
Hi.
Ellen,
Hello.
Didn't blow away. It was very, very, very low. Bertie, I'm going to be out of town next Sunday. I'm
Oh,
sorry to miss the last one.
yeah, no worries. We'll miss you for sure.
I've enjoyed your class. Now, the next one is called 1,000 Gifts.
Yes. And I think that's an Ann Boskamp book. I didn't look it up, but Father Dave, I remember she said it was going to start in November, so I'm not sure if they're going to take a week off or and then begin or what day exactly because
Okay.
yeah, that might be the plan, but I haven't seen like a start date yet.
Well, I'll be getting emails, so it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Is it one town? I'm trying to think. I know there was a link to purchase the book through the Amazon Smile, but I might be mixing the title up with something else.
Are you teaching it, or Peter, are you just teaching it?
Father Dave, he's back from Maine.
Oh, okay.
well then I remember them saying this morning that the small groups were going to do a book about gratitude. So I'm
Yeah,
wondering if that's the book the small groups are doing. I don't know.
I think our book, I think it's called 1,000 Gifts.
Yes, and it is Ann Voskamp book. So I have that book. I started reading it. I never finished it though. So I should go back. That's a good sign. I need to go back.
Opportunity knocks.
Yeah, for sure. There's
Linda.
Hi, Glenda.
Hi, y'all.
yeah.
Hi.
It was really interesting to see the Traces of the Trade Part 2 discussion. Anybody have any feedback on that? No. Okay.
Yeah.
It was interesting how so many of us reacted so differently,
Right. That's true.
but everybody's reaction's valid because it's their reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I typed my word in, but then I got too shy to share at the end.
Well, I did not intend to be the first. Trust me.
What was your word, Bertie?
Exhausted because it was like
Tell us about that.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. I see like the racism problem from my perspective and like having to interact with it on a daily basis, like through microaggressions and, protecting my children. And then thinking back to how someone, the perspective of the enslaved people and how like they were just brutally dehumanized and like thinking like, oh my goodness, it's like, how did they live from day to day under so much oppression and restraint and and it was just like I was exhausted at the end of it. Like
Yeah.
so yeah, and I was like, oh, I don't, and then I was too tired to speak up during the group.
You were exhausted. I've heard that from a number of African Americans, not just in that, a setting like we were in, but just about life in general. How exhausting it is to deal with what you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And especially to do that and to keep a loving heart
Yeah.
and a positive attitude, which you obviously have both. And I can't even imagine what it's like, but it must be exhausting.
Yeah.
Please, you all go on today's second page 3A of the Temple Telegram
Mhm.
and read a insightful article called "Racial Tensions Survive in America's Sundown Towns."
Wow. Definitely gonna check that out. It's like all these topics are like, kind of coming to the surface and, making the newspaper. And it's just, yeah, I think something's changing. And so,
I hope so.
yeah.
There's an article in the Houston paper today about a young African American man who ran for city council in Jasper, Texas. And I don't know if y'all remember about Jasper.
Oh, yes.
That's where Robert Byrd was killed, and it's 84% white, and it's been very, very oppressive against all people of color forever. And this young man ran for city council as a write-in in 2017 and was elected. And now he's running, I think he's 31 now. He's running against Brian Babin for that seat in Congress. And Babin is very popular in that area. He was my congressman. He was not popular with me in any way, but he's very popular in that area. And I just admire the courage of this young man to make that effort, because I'm pretty sure he's not going to win. And the Democratic Party is too, because they're not giving him any support. But there's always the next time and the next time and the next time. And eventually someone in Deep East Texas who has darker skin than mine is going to win a seat in Congress.
Right after that happened, I was at my for 22 years, went to a meeting in Washington every summer with a bunch of civic educators. And a friend of mine who's Black from Beaumont brought her aunt and cousin, or maybe they were both her aunts. I can't remember. But anyway, they were from Jasper. And when I met them, and I've known their niece for a long, long time, and I said, oh, I'm so ashamed being a white person that there are people that are so horrible in this world that they would do something like that. And I said, and you live there? She said, yeah. She said, we have friends. She says, we don't ever have any trouble.
Yeah.
Of course, there are those people who were terrible, but she says, we personally have never had any trouble. But I thought that, I was surprised at that. Of course, how long ago was that? That was years ago.
Yeah, at least 20 years ago, maybe longer. And if I remember correctly, he was asked by some, I don't know who, to move into government subsidized housing in order to integrate that housing unit. And that's how he got there. He was from Beaumont, I believe. And he was asked to do that, and he did. And it did not turn out well for him. And it sure put a black eye on Jasper, Texas.
Oh, gosh, yes. Mm-hmm. And I remember the gentleman who was murdered was of a higher socioeconomic level than were was it 2 men who killed him?
Yes. 3, I think, 3.
Than those men were.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say that the Episcopal Church in Jasper really stepped up, and they, of course, you can't defend the man after he's dead, but they were at every hearing, every news conference, every, they were at the trial, the priest wearing his collar and people wearing their Episcopal Church shield pins. And they let it know that the Episcopal Church was not in favor of that. I knew that priest and I was very proud of him.
Yeah. Wow. It's some difficult times, and, sometimes have to stand up in those, places to see Christ and exhibit, Christ in the world. So I'm sure that was very scary,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with all my technological problems. I'm sure it won't be the first time, it won't be the last. Sometimes it works right away, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, does anyone want to share our opening prayer?
Okay. Do it.
Is it on?
All right, let's all bow our head.
Okay.
Oh, I can see it. Can everyone else see it? Okay. Let's pray. And I need to shrink so I can see the whole prayer. Blessed are you, Lord Jesus Christ. You crossed every border between divinity and humanity to make your home with us. Help us to welcome you in newcomers, migrants, and refugees. Blessed are you, God of all nations. You bless us, our land richly with goods of creation and with people made in your image. Help us to be good stewards and peacemakers who live as your children. Blessed are you, Holy Spirit. You work in the hearts of all to bring about harmony and goodwill. Strengthen us to welcome those from other lands, cultures, and religions, that we may live in human solidarity and in hope. God of all people, grant us vision to see your presence in our midst, especially in our immigrant sisters and brothers. Give us courage to open the door to our neighbors and grace to build a society of justice.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much. This week I had a reflection on kind of some of the topics that we were discussing last week, because I came across an article about it kind of disturbed me, and I took a little snippet to share with the group. And this is going back to criminal justice and things of that sort. But in Williamson County, just down the road, they were offering deputies gifts of steakhouse gift cards when they used force in situations. And I think down there, the sheriff, I think he was recently charged with some improprieties, but I think it's kind of stemming around this incident that's involving the March 2019 death of Javier Ambler II, or it might be another death. Honestly, I can't remember at this time, but it was just really disheartening to see that, sometimes these things are kind of going on, and there seems like it could be just the start to illuminate a problem of like this unknown or undercover, misuse and abuse of power and policing it just down the road from us. I just kind of wanted to share and see, has anyone else heard about this situation?
Yes, I read about it in the Texas Tribune.
Yes.
Yeah, and so, I just wanted to bring it up, and if anybody had any thoughts or reflections of what they thought about what's going on, or.
It's reprehensible, that's for sure.
Williamson County has had its problems. Remember the DA that withheld exculpatory evidence in a man's conviction for the murder of his wife, and 25 years later, he finally got out. And I can't remember what happened to that.
Yeah, I think it's Michael
But
Morton.
the man who was in prison for 25 years came and spoke at the state bar convention where I was. And that was really interesting getting to hear that. And then you're right, the sheriff had some issues and now this.
Yeah.
This is not exactly the same thing, or it's definitely not the same thing, but was it also in Williamson County where this was at the beginning of COVID, where there was all that talk about somebody going to a birthday party of a child, but they were using like a fire truck. I'm probably getting this all out of.
Right. I know that was Bill Gravel, and I think he is in Williamson County. I did see that.
It was abuse of city stuff. My words aren't coming to me, but you know the incident I'm talking about. It was with good intention. They were going to go help this little boy or girl have a happy birthday, but they were using things that in an inappropriate way. And it was during the COVID stuff, all at the very beginning. So anyway, sorry, I just thinking it's the same area.
Right. And I think you're right. And kind of another thing I wanted to bring attention to this is we kind of have to look out for this maybe in our own community, because I have never experienced anything, or heard any whispers of this here in Bell County, but it's just sad to see that our neighbors down the road are having to live in a community where this is happening. And so I just wanted to throw that out there this morning, just to kind of keep us like remembering and seeing how the things we're discussing connects to our world and our community around us. But this week our theme for this week is welcoming the stranger, racial justice and fixing our broken immigration system. And was going to start with kind of an overview of some topics that came up in the book, where the author starts by talking about the history of injustice in immigration policy. For example, some policies against people who want to come here from Mexico, restrictions from those from China and Japan, including, I don't know if he discussed it particularly, but there's a history in the United States because of the camps during. I might need some history help on this one with the camps where the Japanese had to go into camps in the United States.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't just Japanese.
Uh-huh.
Actually, that was by far the largest number, but they had other groups too, German and Italians.
Right. And so, there's this undercurrent like history of like racial injustice with regard to immigration policy. But then when we come back and look at the biblical perspective about welcoming the stranger, it seems as though the Bible is very clear that, the author writes, the Bible's messages about welcoming strangers and outsiders who are almost always from another ethnicity or race. That's what most strangers are in a new country. And he also points to a Bible verse that says, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. And also, the author points out, we're commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we're specifically told that the stranger is our neighbor. And so with that, I kind of thought, like, is there anything that we can discuss about immigration here in Bell County? We're not really on the border. Like, it might not be as such of a hot topic as it would be like on the border, but kind of just throwing it out there. Does anyone want to kind of begin? Like, why is it important to discuss immigration here in Bell County?
Well, we have had several times in the last 20 years where the county has taken in people that were victims of hurricanes. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of, I know, which one was it, Carrie? Help me. that so many came to our schools.
Katrina.
Katrina,
Yeah.
and
And
you know,
Colleen
these,
Convention Center in Colleen housed, or somewhere in Colleen, they were staying, right?
mhm.
I mean, is
And
that-
I thought at the Expo Center too, maybe.
That does sound familiar. Was it Hurricane Ike? Or no, I don't know. That might be too far.
I get them all mixed up.
Me, me too,
But
unfortunately.
it was a bad one.
Yeah, I think
Katrina was the
Katrina was
one.
the big one.
Yeah, that was the one that hit New Orleans, and
Right.
so many people died, and they had to just bust people out of there. And a lot of them, initially went to the Astrodome, and then they dispersed them from there, kind of all over Texas.
Right.
So,
When we were getting them in this area, there was a lot of talk about what we could do to help, like with food or clothing. I'm trying to remember everything, but that was, I guess, through the churches. And then Helen, I remember about the schools, because they did. They put them not just in Temple ISD. It seems like they were scattered throughout this
Yes, they were.
county.
were there also those from like other countries as well, or maybe some that were undocumented? Was that an issue during that time?
There may have been an issue with, I'm trying to remember from the school standpoint, and before you can enter a school, you have to prove your inoculations or immunizations and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to remember what circumstances were surrounding that, if they just waived that. Does anyone remember?
I don't remember about that. I do remember the
But that-
federal case about serving the children of undocumented
yes.
immigrants, when it said, yes, schools are required to do that.
Well, I kind of see things maybe as far as undocumented or immigrants from other countries, see them from maybe a different. Since I lived in Guatemala for 30 years, I know people that have family that are undocumented and that they came and, had what they call coyotes or whatever, and had people, and that they're still, many of them paying thousands of dollars for coming. But I guess the thing right now, I don't know that much about Bell County and what immigrants or what people are here, but I feel very deeply about the children that have been separated from their parents, from their family, and some have been put all over the United States, and then sometimes their parents get deported, but the child does not, and then it takes them a long time to get back together. I mean, I think that is so traumatic for the children, for the parents. And it seems like lately, I haven't really read anything about that. I don't know what's happening right now, but I'm assuming that it's still going on. But I know that there is less people even probably coming to the border because of all the COVID and all that. I don't know what's happening with that.
There are less of them being separated because they're keeping them all on the other side of the border, if they can.
Which is very dangerous too, because
yeah, it is. But the thing that struck me at that time, when it was at its height, was that they could not tell the parents where the children were. They didn't know. They didn't keep track of where they sent the children. And I thought, we can track an outbreak of E. coli or, any of those food poisonings to the farm it came from. But we can't keep track of children? Really?
Yeah.
I could not believe that.
I hate to say it, but it reminds me, all of this talk is reminding me, I was amazed at the movie Traces of the Trade, and it reminds me of what happened way back in that history, our history, when families were totally separated from one another. And you all, I think all of you have seen this. So I don't need to go into that, but that was just a tragic, there was no love in that. There was no Christ in that.
Well, even in the aftermath of the Civil War, many people spent years, decades, their entire lives trying to find their family members who had been sold away. Parents trying to find their children, children trying to find their parents, siblings trying to find each other with, not a whole lot to go on. The churches, I understand, particularly in the South, the African American churches would get lists of people who were looking for their family, and they would read those out in church and say, this person from this plantation or who was owned by this person is looking for his brother, his mother, his father, whomever. And a lot of people were reunited that way, but a lot of people never found their families.
I like that. That's like an interesting connection, because I know this was a difficult topic for me because I feel kind of, I've never thought about immigration and immigration reform, but the connection to how what happened with regard to the slaves and, the breaking up of those families and then the breaking up of families today with regard to immigration and immigration policy, I think we have to be aware and alert that it could be a slippery slope to somewhere we don't want to be. And so I think, that it is important emotionally, morally, what's going on. We have to be aware about it. But, it's just eye-opening to think, like, if you're not careful and alert that these things happen and you kind of look the other way because the border's way down there. But if you look up, sometimes you'll realize, well, something similar is happening in your community, or your community may be benefiting from it because there's like an encampment or something in your community. And then, your community is starting to support these policies and making livings off of it, and you don't even know about it, kind of with what happened in Traces of the Trade, where everybody was kind of complicit in the slave trade is because they were making money off of it. And so, that's just very eye-opening for me, with the discussion we're having here today, that, you can't just think it's somebody else's problem,
You're so right, Marty. It can slip up on us without us, because you're right. It doesn't seem to be something going on right here, but we know it is happening.
Aren't there detention centers here in Texas that people have been kept for sometimes years? I don't know all the details. I've just read some different things, and I'm not the best for keeping all the facts right up front, but I know that there's still people that are in detention centers they're trying to make their case. And I know, most people, at least in Guatemala, don't really want to immigrate to the United States. They really would rather be with their family and their culture and their country. And so they're only coming out of the majority. I'm sure they're, the majority out of dire need. And then I do feel like what you were saying, Bertie, it does say in the Bible that we, Jesus said we are to welcome the stranger. And I don't think we've been doing a very good job of that. And really, I know some things I read that the numbers are not really so hard that they couldn't be incorporated into different communities and people could help them. I know Canada does a much better job with helping, people who are immigrants there.
Sadly, the United States has a very long history of that, starting from the very beginning era, even during the colonial period with immigrants. And once we became a country, it was mostly tied to political concerns because immigrants tended to vote with the Democratic Republicans and not the Federalists. And so you had all these laws passed back and forth, and it's something that has never stopped.
And that reminds me, with regard to the holding or the detention facilities, sometimes you have to follow the money in some of this, because I know
Always.
because I know that some places, like, first of all, there's the issue of privately run, like, prisons. And then I think there's some kind of contracting with facilities to house immigration detention and things of that sort. And, you know, you just, and when there's money involved, there's really kind of an opportunity for people to be exploited again, kind of like what happened with the slave trade in the past. But I do know that there is a detention facility south of San Antonio, because I've had to go there for a client in the past. And then in an article that I read, they say that there's some ICE detention facility in the Waco area. And I don't know if that's part of, if there's just like a housing as part of the jail that's already in McLennan County, or if it's separate.
A lot of them.
Okay, yeah.
There used to be one over in Hutto. I don't know if it's still there, and that was a detention center for children who'd been removed from their families.
It's been a while since I retired, but when I was working at Bell County, I supported the jail. And the jail would pick up undocumented, and they would house them and save them for the ICE to pick them up. But in the meantime, the government is paying for their keep in the Bell County jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's still being done, but I imagine it probably is.
Yeah.
I just looked up the facility in El Paso. There's a detention center in El Paso that housed like over 14,000 this past year. And it says that the El Paso Center is one of 637 ICE detention facilities in the United States. So according to this, there's a whole lot of them.
And they're in our community somewhere, probably quietly doing whatever they want to do. So we probably, you know, if you feel led kind of to think about like, what is going on and what are they doing, you know, and what about our leadership here, political leaders? Like, are they supporting this? Are they getting funding for this? Are they protecting human rights in these places? So these are just questions I'm throwing out because they're things that I really hadn't even considered at this point.
We have a case going before the Supreme Court right now, whether to count undocumented in the census.
Right.
And, you know, the cities that these people live in still have to provide, you know, the services for everyone else, and they're going to be part of it, but they're going to lose representation in Congress if, you know, the population is cut down. It's just a mystery to me. I don't understand.
The Constitution is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree, but I don't know. Right now, I'm not trusting the Supreme Court too well.
Well, as Helen says, the Constitution is pretty clear, you know, and I just have to have faith that while some of those justices are not ones that I would have preferred to see seated, they do know how to read, and they know how to read the Constitution, and they know how to read case law. And I think that no matter what their judicial philosophy is, they all want what's best and what's right for America. So I don't see how they could possibly say, oh, that's okay, we'll go ahead and let you do that. Because as Helen says, the Constitution is very clear.
Yeah. And, you know, even preparing for our session today, I was like, okay, well, let's see what Representative Carter says about immigration or, you know, border security. When I got over there, I realized it was mostly propaganda on his website as opposed to anything that's helpful and factual. And so I was kind of disappointed by that. But yeah, I was like, oh, you know, it gave me a very uncomfortable feeling that our representatives are not, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just a sign of the times that they're more interested, I guess, in propaganda as opposed to facts and communication, open communication with their constituents. Like we can't read things ourselves and evaluate and analyze.
Yeah.
So
many of those detention facilities are privately owned, and the company, and it's by a very small number of companies, 2 or 3, I think. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they are lobbying like crazy and that they are contributing to congressional campaign funds and that they expect results for their money.
Absolutely.
And what did you say earlier, Clint, about the question about money? And you said always. I don't remember exactly what the question was.
Follow the money.
Follow the money.
yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
always.
for sure. Okay, so this was another point that the author brought up. Growth in American churches has been driven largely by immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of feeds into our discussion question of the week. How have your church and or your community been involved in and affected by the immigration debate? What are some of the successes and where has the community fallen short? And so just throw it out there to kind of start discussion. Like, is that something we see here in Temple, that the growth in churches is driven by immigrants? And, you know, how does the church locally here respond or play a role in immigration and that sort?
I don't know that we've ever really talked about it, to be honest. But we do talk about having our doors open. And they are open even when they look like they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think I think this is the first time, of course, you all may know better than I, but that we've made a pointed effort to do something to even talk about immigration and for the church to be involved in it. And it's so positive and healthy to do that, because these are topics that a lot of people don't talk about, because you get into a political argument and it's a friend and you may disagree completely politically, but so you avoid those topics that you think might offend someone, even though you may feel deeply. My parents were immigrants, and that's what I don't understand, why people can't come to the country and become citizens. And everybody says to me, well, it's not as easy to become a citizen. And so I think we need to talk about the things, and I think the church could have a healthy discussion about it. And I'm so proud of us for doing it.
And
I am too, and I know Carrie is going to remember this. Years ago, when Andy Doyle was our curate right out of seminary, and he was bilingual. He is bilingual, and we had a concerted effort of putting flyers on all the homes in the community within Carrie, do you remember how far out?
It was more than 1 mile radius, but it was
from our church, yeah.
Around.
And tried to have things getting there. And I think, Vivian, didn't you come? We even had some Spanish classes.
And
yeah, I think so, yeah.
We were trying to,
Barbara Johnson did a bilingual class.
Yeah.
Not bilingual, or what English is a second language. What
English is a second language. She did.
Yeah, I went to a Spanish for Dummies, even though I'd had 3 years of it. It didn't sink in, but we really, really tried. And I don't know that we got.
And Helen, we offered a bilingual service that was with music. Andy played a guitar. I guess he still does, but he could do the Eucharist in full. He could do everything in Spanish. He truly is. Yeah. And the reason I'm saying that is because he offered this our church offered this service to our community. I believe it was on Sunday afternoons. Is that remember? And it was bilingual. And we kept that going for 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months, 6 months. I think you just have to, and people, I think at our church were discouraged because not a lot of people came. But I think it's one of those things. Anyway, I'm going way off on something else.
I think that's good and helpful because, it got my mind thinking like maybe that's an opportunity for the future that the leadership can discuss. Is maybe some sort of kind of bilingual thing if the community around the church is changing and kind of just starting small and kind of revisiting that again, because we have so many wonderfully talented educators in our community that maybe ESL classes could start up again, or maybe the Spanish classes. And then also, I will just share a personal experience. Last week, I watched a church service. I think it was the National Cathedral, where everything was in English until they got to the gospel, and they read it in Spanish first. And I was like, so this is what it feels like not to understand what's going on. And it was very impactful, because I could understand it, because I have a few years of Spanish, and that's what was interesting, is like I kind of could follow. But just to think, if I was in a completely different country and that's all I heard, I listened to the message differently, because it was me trying to piece together what was happening. And then after that, I heard someone read the gospel in English, and I just thought, this is something I wish we could do maybe in our church, even if we don't need anybody there to hear it in Spanish, but just to hear it as a stranger, as, you know, someone just lost in the world and trying to make sense of it. So I really was moved by that. And I just hope, you know, maybe at some point that's something we can do, because we do have Hispanic people in our community, and these little things may be things that, may be things that would make them feel more welcome to just kind of come in and see what's going on if they hear like little things like that.
I'm about to stop because I want to, you can listen, all of our diocesan services that are offered like at council and those kind of things are always bilingual. They always offer the gospel and the prayers, and the booklet you get is English on one side and Spanish on the other. So even if not everything is said in your language, you can read it in your language. So that's one thing. And as far as ESL classes at our church, there has been talk about that in the fairly recent past, long before COVID, but during this interim period. But it kind of got squelched before it ever really took off for other reasons. But I think the seeds were planted again, and that I'm glad we're having this discussion, because I do think once we are in a place where maybe we can regather some, there could be life breathed back into that.
And so
another option, I was just going to say, another option we could offer would be the road to citizenship. I think a lot of immigrants that have come and are not documented do not know how to go about doing that. And there are some classes, I think, available to them in Killeen at maybe one of the colleges, but I think that could easily be done with just 2 or 3 people to be spreading the information to them. I think they're scared. A lot of the people who have come here illegally are scared. I mean, they stay in the shadows so they don't get noticed. And they're not going to ask those questions. Many of the workers that we had in Belton ISD did not use their health insurance, which was free to them. And they refused it because they knew they'd have to put their name on some kind of dotted line. So many of our workers that were Hispanic and that were undocumented didn't take health insurance. So somehow to give them more courage to follow through and get that documentation, because if they can't read, they can learn to read pretty quickly, because the test is not that hard. And they can learn to read what's on that test.
And Vivian, that was exactly part of the conversation. It was a brainstorming conversation about having ways to help them on the road to citizenship. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
One of the things I know Peter's read, and I know some of the others of you may have read, a book called Holy Currencies by Eric Law. He's a priest out in California. And he talks about the things that we have to offer, the things that we can use. He calls them currencies because they flow. And he talks about money and time and space and leadership and all of those things. And he gives several examples of churches who shared their space and were neither congregation was happy, you know, because the white congregation was like, well, those people are coming into our church and they're doing this and that. And the other congregation was, well, you know, we have to be so careful. We can't do this, we can't do that. And when he helped them see that each of them had something to offer to the other, then they began to work together. And I don't think the particular one I'm thinking about, I don't think they ever became one congregation. They still held two services, but they did a lot of other things together. They did social things together and ministry things together, and help, you know, each of them helped the other with what they were doing. And, you know, when you said it went on, the Hispanic went on for 3 or 4 months, the things I've read, you've got to go for a year if you're going to make any progress at all.
I'd like to say something about that. I could be wrong about this time span, but I agree. You need to let it grow. Or not. And it was said, this was said in my presence. I won't go into when or where. It's been a while back that was a total failure, but I don't think it was, because we offered that, and it was certainly not a failure to the people that did come and felt welcomed by it. And it is not a failure if we are still talking about it so many years later. So I think great seeds were planted then, and I'm grateful to Helen for bringing it back to our attention, and for Bertie for starting the conversation about that. So sometimes I forget things, so y'all need to remind me.
I think you're in good company on forgetting things. That's why I have to write things down just to keep up with the conversation, honestly, so I won't forget. But wow, this is a lot of good discussion. The other thing I was going to talk about is kind of raising awareness in our community about immigration. In our book, the author talked about a fast for families, where there was this period of fasting where there were some dedicated people to fast. And it was an attempt to use spiritual power to change political power. And those who weren't able to fast for whatever reason for those extended periods of time, sometimes they would just fast a meal or come by and pray and things of that sort. So I was just going to offer, is this something, not necessarily specifically the fasting, but is there anything that we could do to help raise awareness in our church and community about immigration and immigration reform?
Meals on Wheels had a program for a while. I don't know if they're still doing it, where they asked their people who are volunteers and people who are involved with Meals on Wheels to fast 1 day a week and to take a picture of an empty place, place setting with no food on it, post it on their Facebook page and say that they were fasting that day in solidarity with the many seniors who didn't have enough to eat. Mm-hmm. And so, if you wanted to do it for some other purpose, that would be a way to do it.
Our youth did a fasting thing. Y'all remember that? It wasn't that long ago. Bertie, I don't know if your children were involved with that or not. If it was before you all came, or
might have been right before we came. I don't remember it right offhand. But
wasn't it during Lent that they did and it had a catchy title, like so catchy I don't remember it.
Okay, we'll figure it out. But what were they doing? What was that fast for?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
Well, they were raising money. We paid them
any amount you wanted.
Yeah, anything for this 24 hours. And did they do a lock-in at the church too?
I think they did. Or they could. I don't know that they had to. Well, yeah, they did, because there was somebody had really studied this, and there's a certain meal you should have after you fasted.
Yes.
They made people prepared that, whatever, I don't remember what it was. So that was their first fight after however many hours.
Go-karts would probably remember.
Yes, they would.
Okay.
Good.
I wanted to ask about if anybody had ever heard about, I wrote it down, the Pray for Reform groups that several churches had, he talks about that, and several churches had joined together and in this Pray for Reform group, I don't know what page that was on, to reform immigration, and they actually made visits to political leaders because he talks about how we're not really, political change doesn't always happen at the top. It happens from the people below, making that a priority. And so had any of you ever heard about that Pray for Reform group, which involved several different denominations and several different leanings, political leanings, from one end of the spectrum to the other when I read the list?
That was something new to me. I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either, which again, that would be several churches joining together, because I think they have a lot of strength joined together.
The Evangelical Immigration Table, is that?
It was Pray for Reform was the group. Pray, the number 4 for reform, Pray for Reform. I'm not sure what page it was on, but I did write that down.
171 in the book.
Okay. So that seems like a model we could, I don't know why we couldn't follow that model if it's already set up somewhere, if we were interested in doing that and having more strength as a church to influence the reform.
Right. I'll see if I can find a link for that, or some information to add to our web page to kind of see what's going on there, because that was something new. Anyone else has any thoughts or ideas?
Well, it seems like in the book there are several things, not just about this, but other, like about racial inequality, that he gives some very concrete steps that people could take. And I really think next time is our last meeting, right? And maybe we could all, look into that more, like what are some steps that we could take? Maybe they're just like baby steps, but it seems like those are important things to do. And maybe, like you were saying, Carrie, maybe it's not something that lasts forever, but if we take these steps, I think even if we get, just help one person or just a few people, that's an important thing to do.
Yes, I think so too.
Definitely. Let's spend some time on our last session kind of thinking about things like that. If you think about things this week, and we can kind of discuss that next week. So I'll make sure that we have that time next week. I know I was looking, and I will just admit that when I think of immigration and the church, I always think that this is something the Catholic Church deals with and handles, because there's such a big Hispanic population in the Catholic Church. And, that uncovers another bias that I have, is that, in Texas, we always think that immigration means a problem or issue with the Hispanic population. But, I think this discussion in this book has helped me become more aware that it's not just about, Texas and the border, that it's about all people from all over the globe. And then all faith communities have a responsibility to, welcome the stranger and see that there are more equitable, fair, and just, immigration policies. And so, I just throw that out there. But one thing that I was looking for groups like maybe in the area that we could kind of look to for some expertise on this. And one I knew right away, I was like, well, this is something LULAC, I'm sure probably know, they have some understanding of, and maybe we could reach out to people in that group, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens. And there is a local group here. But then I'm also a member of the NAACP, but I don't really hear like immigration come up in those discussions there. And so one of my next steps is I wanted to kind of look to see like, is there something with the NAACP that they kind of look into immigration policy and reform? But I also saw that the Episcopal Church has Episcopal Migration Ministries, which is a refugee resettlement and immigration advocacy program of the Episcopal Church. And also locally, there's, which local meaning Austin, but the Refugee Services of Texas. And I have links to those on our webpage as resources where they have information and possible help to kind of see what could be some possible next steps or little steps that we could take, you know, to try to address this in the context of being the beloved community. And so maybe those are some resources if this next week, if you want to take a look in those places to kind of get some ideas that we could kind of share with our leadership at the church and discuss as a group and give to the leaders as some ideas of how we can address these types of concerns. But does anyone else have any things or resources or places we might be able to look?
Episcopal Migration Ministries is a good one. And they have, if probably off the episcopalchurch.org is the National Church website, and probably on there you can link to it. And they send out emails regularly. I get them a lot. I wanted to say something that might be heretical, and you know, y'all can chase me out of the church if you want. But I think one of the things that we might need to get past, and I don't know if this is what was going on when you all were reaching out to immigrants in the past, but I know in the little church that I came out of, if we did things for other people, tried to help them, or we were involved with them in any way, and they didn't come to our church, we got discouraged and stopped doing it. Well, they're not coming to our church anyway. And I think, so why are we doing this? And I think if we can be of a mindset of we are doing this because this is what Jesus told us to do, and not we're doing this because we want new members in our church, you know, we want our ASA to be higher, then that's a whole different way of looking at things. And, you know, if we look at things that way, more, you know, you're our brother and our sister, and we are doing this because we love Jesus and he loves you, then, you know, they may show up on Sundays. They may not, but either way, we're doing what Jesus calls us to do.
And I hear what you're saying, Glenda, and I think it's an excellent point. The ESL conversation I mentioned earlier was never about growing the church. It was about trying to look outside our walls,
Yeah,
and helping others.
Good.
They have been bringing them to our church, and the other side of that conversation about bringing them to our church so that we can help them, because you got to have someplace.
Mm-hmm.
We felt like if they were not churched or didn't know about Christ, didn't know about the Bible, at least being in that place, they would see, whether they could read it or not, but they would see just the normal things that are in a church building. And I'm not talking about the altar or anything. I'm talking about like in a classroom where you would have, you know, a cross, and you'd have whatever, but that literature, I mean, we talked about all that. The purpose was to help them learn another language, the predominant language of where they're living, and also to help them on the road to citizenship and just give them normal skills to survive in this country, in this state, in this town.
Well, good for y'all, because that is not what I saw in my little town.
Well, it never was more than a couple of conversations, and it had to come. There was a reason it had to stop when it did. It was not stopped. It was put on hold. The conversation, I think, could continue. It just, the timing was wrong.
I think when we think about refugees, we maybe here in Texas, we think more about people from Central America or Latin America, but they're not the only refugees that, I mean, all the Syrian people. I know my brother and sister-in-law live in Georgetown, and their congregation hosted a supper during Ramadan that was, I think it was a group of Turkish Muslims that came, and they brought food for everybody. And it was Christian churches and Jewish, and then their group. And it was just kind of to, get together and share a meal and, be together. And I think something like that, I don't really know if we have, a temple here or synagogues. I don't really, okay. So that could be something too, that would be a good thing to do in our community.
There's just so much to do.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing
Plenty to choose from.
the nice thing about a congregation of this size, again, coming from a tiny little church in a tiny little town, is that with the number of people we have, people have different interests, and some people might be interested in working with ESL, which is not just for Spanish-speaking people. The process of teaching English as a second language can be done to people of any language. There are classes in Houston that have kids that speak 17 different languages, and they're all in the same ESL class. And then other people might be interested in immigrants, and other people might be interested in, whatever. And so it's possible to have a number of different ministries reflecting the interests and calling of the people in our church.
Yeah.
We got a lot of opportunity ahead of us. So that's all that I had for this week. Does anyone else have anything that they wanted to share? Okay, I'll pull up these last few slides. Okay, so yes, next week is our final week together with this book, and it will cover chapter 10, The Bridge to a New America, having the new talk in our schools, communities, and congregations. So kind of thoughts of looking forward and the steps we can take ahead of us. Does anyone have any announcements or prayer requests or anything?
Just don't forget next week, Music to Help Others at 4.
Okay, got that.
There'll be a lot of information about that. And I think Leon was going to try to make up is going to make up a commercial about it.
Great, thank you. And then also we talked about this a little at the beginning, but the next forum or adult forum book will be 1,000 Gifts by Ann Voskamp. And so we're looking forward to Father Dave coming to lead that group. I think there'll be more information coming out with regard to the start date. I know it said November, but does anyone know any more details or anything? I think that's all that I saw.
Regarding the concert next week, who's it helping?
It is helping. It's there's a flyer in your sack that you got.
Okay. Well, and there'll be more information coming out as well.
There will be, and I should know, and I apologize. It's
no worries. We thank you for all the work you do for our church, Miss Carrie. I know it's
yes.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Oh.
And
Thank you
for being a part of this forum that has just been really very helpful, I think, for many reasons. And it's not just for what we're learning, it's what we're able to share about what we're learning.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Yes, every day that I get to do this work, I'm amazed. And so I'm just grateful and just open to how God's like using us in our conversations to work together to build a better community. So thank you all for, and the participation with everyone to kind of help to build and do this work is just phenomenal. And I'm just in awe of how much, like, if you trust God, if you think you're not equipped to do something, but you say yes with an open heart, that God will just show up and just do the work through you. I mean, that's how I feel about it. Like, I think I just see God working in each one of us here together to like take on these difficult discussions, ideas, and tasks, and helping us to move forward, you know, just piece by piece, trusting the process, trusting each other. So I thank you all so much for your help and work and, you know, digging in to do this work together. So
Thank you, Birdie.
no, not
Thank
me.
you, Birdie.
And with that, is there anyone that would like to share our closing prayer for us?
I'll do
read
it. Go ahead, Vivian.
I can.
Okay.
Let
Oh
us-
God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 I love that prayer.
I do too.
I want to make a poster out of it. I was like, we should have a poster
I
contest.
love it.
What? Everybody writes it out and decorates it, and we bring them next week. Okay, that's another thing we can do to have a little fun to wrap up. So I'll put a
I'll
post.
miss you all next week.
All
Sorry.
right, well, have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.